After being completely yoinked into another dimension, the Guardian Sage looked around to see how many ships had been pulled into another dimension with him. Not all the ships made it back, mind you, but almost all of them. When he finally got a chance to see what was going on, as he was able to actually go into the broken satellite around the blue planet, the Guardian Sage couldn't do much at that point except watch for centuries. As it turned out, whatever type of disturbance it was had made it impossible to return, actually increasing the amount of shields around this planet had actually doubled. In fact, he looked closer and realized there was not one of these radiation belts that blocked everything, but now two. Going by a simple square cube law, he realized it wouldn't be just two stars he would have to destroy just to send one ship back, but at least a half a dozen stars, which was far too high a price for any species to pay just to send one ship to one dimension. It didn't make any sense. The Guardian Sage was more than a little upset at this, yet he knew that eventually they would find a way back, but for the time being, all he could do was watch. He watched as he did before, but this time, since the satellite itself was facing in one way, he was able to see down to the planet. The problem is, he wasn't able to see all the time. It was intermittent at best, and when he could see what was going on, could hear what was going on, he realized that the ships themselves that did not get pulled into another dimension, if they were anywhere close to that blue dot in the middle of the void, they lost all their power and would end up crashing down, causing even more destruction. Thankfully for those on board, or also those on the planet, if you want to look on the bright side of things, which at that time there wasn't much, they would simply be diving into the vast oceans themselves. Unfortunately, at that speed, even the strongest of hulls is going to crack. With that, it's going to take on water, and without any type of power, the ship itself will eventually sink down into the deepest depths. He said a prayer as he realized what was going to happen next. The waters that had gushed out from inside the planet now receded back in, and these ships were sucked down into the fissures themselves, sometimes blocking the fissures. However, others disappeared into the darkness deeper than the satellite could actually see. Looking around this planet, he could see that there was one last colony that had survived. Just one. Yet, this colony could no longer return. He watched as the colony on the planet rebuilt and created devices that were absolutely amazing, things he wouldn't have thought of on his own dimension. Instead of using the water and ore to create energy, they seemed to raise massive towers with some sort of bulbous area on top and use these towers to collect energy from the universe itself. Why didn't he think of this? They collected energy that seemed to flow throughout their own dimension, and then thought for a moment and realized in no other dimension this happens. He watched as they created massive vessels that moved through the air with only the need to recharge every few solar rotations. Like their own fleet, they would only stop to recharge and recrew everything. These massive ships almost took the place of their own ships, yet they were all suborbital. On closer inspection, everyone could see that they were using the ether energy, as what they called it, and along with that, harmonics, which were part of their lives. But this was a common practice. Everyone knew about that, except seemingly the locals. Holding on to this technology seemed to be the best thing they could do at this point, since there wasn't much of it until they spread themselves out across the planet even more. Using this free energy, along with the harmonics, along with all the resonance that they were using, they allowed their bodies to live far longer than they should, especially since there was something coming across the sensors that they didn't understand. For some reason, that burst of water had done something. It was something in the air, but something had taken the air. The oxygen, the atmosphere itself, was so much denser. Not even a half of the atmosphere actually remained after that. It seemed as though the water had come up and pulled it down, and now those of large size, compared to those being born now, were having trouble even moving. It was difficult for them to move around with any type of speed, as they would get completely and totally winded very quickly. Yet they continued on thanks to their technology. Holding on to this technology they believed was the best course of action, because they didn't want the locals to get a hold of it. In fact, it worried them. The locals were still strong and quite numerous, and yet they believed that they had control. It was their choice. It was their responsibility. Only they were allowed to have this technology and to Hades with the rest of them. That was until they realized that the great-grandson of the Guardian Sage was able to get enough knowledge to refit a recovered power source from an Odin-class ship called the Mjolnir, and he was able to fashion this power source into a strange device that seemed to siphon all sorts of electricity from the area, and was able to focus this ether so well that it seemed to be able to strike out as an electronic weapon. It seemed like a natural process, almost what the locals called lightning. However, like so many others that discover a new weapon, they saw the ability to gain power, dominance over others. The locals personified this, and they began to wage a long war against the last advanced colony, demanding the technology, and if it wasn't shared, they would destroy it. In response, and also in fear, the colony did not want war, as they realized that they were completely outnumbered and outmatched, as the locals were now being able to siphon off some of this technology to create their own weapons. Weapons strong enough to finally get through the thin layers of armor that they had that stopped all sorts of rocks and sticks, but would not stop anything made of metal itself. They tried to slow down those to the southeast by building a giant stone wall to keep the locals out. It was effective, but only for a while. During this time, it was clear to see from the Guardian Sage that his bloodline had grown very thin. In desperation, the inbreeding of different families to maintain such purity within their bloodlines began. The results were mixed, to say the least. Even though it was clear that they simply needed to bring 1 or 2 generations of new blood into the genetic code and they would not have any issues, they still insisted on purity, and this mixed result became horrifying. As the wall held during this time, the technology that those who visited their cities could see made them all lust for this. They lusted for the power, as those that only had a slight sliver of the Guardian Sage's bloodline in them. They believed that this technology should be in their hands, in the hands of what they called royalty, and this royalty being a slang term for slave master. With this, the colony said no, and all-out war began. Though the wall had proved effective against those to the southeast, now they had to deal with direct south, northeast, west, northwest, from different directions, and they could not put up barriers fast enough. It was not possible. They prepared themselves for a battle which they knew they'd end up killing so many of the locals that they didn't want to destroy, locals that they had come reliant on but now were coming down at them, locals that were being led in by propaganda to lay their lives down in order to give this power to their so-called royalty, i.e. the slave master. The Guardian Sage worried about all this, and it was some time before he found out what happened. He finally got the reports back as the satellite blinked in and out and finally back to life. And it showed that to save themselves, the colony had deployed a weapon no one expected. One that the Guardian Sage forbid. This would kill 90% of all fully developed locals across the planet. Even from his station, the guardian sage could see this particular power, which was a mix of light and dark mixing together, swirling around in a torrent, building up more and more and more, getting ready to fire. The guardian sage couldn't do anything at this point, and whispered, "No," as it was deployed. It leveled the entire colony in the process, as the shockwave from its own power output destroyed every city there, bringing it down to the absolute surface, sending debris flying in all different directions, stopping only short of the wall itself. All those attacking were done. They simply fell over dead, and if the shockwave hit them, their body flew into the air, flailing like a rag doll before landing with a sickening crunch. Many were absolutely aghast at what they saw on the monitor, and the guardian sage himself, for the first time, went pale, believing that they had just watched all of the descendants there delete themselves from the planet. The satellite itself blinked in and out a few more times, but then came back, and the sage watched close as he realized that the colony had taken the most beautiful locals they could find, and all the technology they could absolutely grab and shove into the few ships that remain, and they sent to the southern point of the planet, a place where no one could possibly travel. There, they could be safe. Seeing this, he remembered that one of his daughters was still in charge, and he simply whispered, "Clever girl." From there, the survivors disappeared underneath the ice cap. So deep, in fact, that even the satellite can't tell where they are. It can tell there's life, but it can't see much else. And they simply wait. From another dimension, the guardian sage also waits, constantly watching the monitors to see what could possibly happen. Is there anything they can do? As they try to figure a way to enter that dimension once again, they watch as different things happen to the planet. It seems as though a few of the species around that dimension that they had talked to before took all their advice and maybe a little bit of technology and put it to good use. Several have interfaced with the planet itself as the local population has grown and stretched out across the entire planet. They see that several of these seem a little aggressive, others seem inquisitive, some seem to truly care. But he's not able to see all that much. All he knows is that they're trying to keep everything away from the locals. It seems as though the royalty still believes that they are the only ones who should have access to this technology. Technology that could save billions, make them essentially immortal, free them from disease, from poverty, from everything. Yet they insist that everyone use technology that is centuries old. This confuses him. It is well noted that the guardian sage will see this happen and mutter the same phrase over and over again. Are they trying to repeat the past? Though the more everyone looks, the more it seems likely that that is exactly what they're doing. It seems as though they've been trying to reconstruct the weapon, figure out how it works, even though the weapon itself ripped everything apart, including itself, when it fired. This was almost a relief to the guardian sage, as he realized that when they used the weapon, it did set them back, and they wouldn't be able to bring any more technology in. Instead of 6 stars, it was up to almost 10 that they would need just to get one ship. So they would have to figure something else to try and get into the dimension. And it was just stopping them from arriving back at that blue planet. Yet the leaders of the world did something worse when the weapon fired. They used it as a giant reset for the world and tried to make the world the way they wanted. The scary part is, as the guardian sage continues to watch, the scary part is that those that rule from the shadows are finding more and more pieces of the old device. Though destroyed, it wasn't exactly atomized. Also, they are able to start translating many of the old tablets that were left. Many of those that came across don't trust paper at all. They don't trust electronics. They want something to stand the test of time, and nothing stands better than stone. Stone carved is a simple way of making sure that no matter what happens, the story continues. However, in there is a way of actually constructing said device. And the Guardian Sage is worried that they just might try it again. In fact, it seems like they're getting closer. Every time the satellite is able to send any type of message out, he's finally able to see what they're doing, how they're building it, and he almost breaks into the widest grin ever seen. Everyone is confused and asks the Guardian Sage why everything is so interesting to him. It's just that planet. What's going on? The Guardian Sage thinks and realizes that the technology that they had is not being built in the same way. They realize that other devices on that planet will also interfere and cause a different type of reaction. The more he thinks about it, the more he goes through all the calculations of what will happen when this weapon fires, hits the massive hadron collider that they have created, and the Guardian Sage smiles even more and thinks to himself, please, please activate it. For when you do, I shall finally be able to return. Hello everybody, this is Syntax. Thank you so much for joining me on the final chapter of this story. Before I go, I need to send out some special thank yous to a few of my supporters, and those will be MTF Guard, Erica Gem, SS Demon, Guardian Sage, and Brian Kemp. Thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Everybody else, I will see you on the next one. This is Syntax, punching out.